Lindz McLeod is a writer at the very beginning of her career. With a degree in creative writing under her belt and some short fiction published, she currently has 2 novels out on submission. For us, she is reading from her novel Wolf Whistle, a subverted Red Riding Hood.
They said a making was the death of childhood, which is why the boy was given lilies before being carried, blushing, into his bride's house. Only a girl could make or unmake a boy if she saw fit to do so. On this late April evening, the air was steamy and sweet with a thick scent of lilies, but Matthew knew that no marriage was scheduled for weeks. He scanned the crowd, locating his mother at the front. Her pale, muscled arms were crossed loosely over her chest. Although the women around her shifted and murmured restlessly, Miss Mab stood silent and still, leading by example. He slid through the knot of boys until he reached Rashad. What's going on? Someone's been taken. He leaned towards his best friend until dark curly hair tickled his nose. Who? Shh, they'll hear you. The Korecki lad. Thomas, but he's only 12. The older one, Rashad breathed, his lips barely moving. Marcin, his mother's frantic. Tall for his age, round-faced, affable, and most importantly, obedient, Marcin Korecki was a well-liked all-rounder. Good at sports, kind to the young ones. Matthew had never thought of Marcin as being in any particular danger, at least not more so than any other boy. He'd left school the previous year, so he'd be 16 by now. 16, he thought, the most dangerous age. The thought sent cold shivers down his arms, in spite of his thick woolen jumper. Miss Korecki exited her house and kicked her garden gate open, with an axe held aloft in her right hand. The crowd hushed expectantly. Mina, please don't. Mr. Korecki tried to grab at her, but she shook him off easily. He reached out again and caught only air. She barked an order and he subsided, hovering just inside the gate with tears staining his cheeks. Their son, Thomas, clung to his father's apron, eyes wide with terror. A susurration ran through the assembled villagers, savoury accusations and sweet gossip mingling on impatient tongues. Each mother had carved out a small space of her own territory, separate from the others by at least an arm length. By contrast, the fathers huddled elbow to elbow in a group, bleeding softly. Several feet from where Matthew and Rashad stood, one of the older girls stood poised, eyes flicking from side to side, waiting to nip the heels of any boy or man who stepped out of line or made too much noise. A female voice, clear and carrying in the silence, cried, "Whore mother." A series of muffled giggles followed. Miss Korecki halted just short of the end of the road and half turned. "Someone got something to say to me." She lifted the axe. No one moved. "Anyone?" The streetlights cast amber puddles over the pavements, but, inches away from where she now stood, the light faded abruptly into inky blackness. In the distance, only one light was visible, startling brilliant and orange, surrounded by thick, whorled tree trunks and shaded by leafy branches. This was the last lamp, which never went out. No one dared build light sources any further inside the forest. The wolves preferred the darkness. It made them happy. No one wanted to find out what would happen if the wolves were unhappy. "Anyone." Miss Korecki repeated the word, but it was no longer a question. The axe drooped, held only by the tips of her fingers. "Tasha, please?" Matthew's mother stirred but said nothing. The women around her exchanged glances. "He was a good enough lad, Mina," one of them said. "It happens sometimes. They can't help themselves." Matthew didn't know whether she was talking about the boys or the wolves. To his left, one of the Hanson twins was sniffling. The wolves might be out already. They might be watching the crowd from the darkness of the forest, wondering which boy would be their next meal. He felt his legs begin to shake as cold fingers of fear slid up his thighs. Sharing his trepidation, the boys drew closer to each other. Rashad was swallowing convulsively. Separated, they were easy targets. Better to stick together. Safety in numbers, selfishness too, and hoping that fate would befall another. "He wouldn't have done anything wrong," Miss Korecki was pleading, turning from one face to the next. "He wouldn't have. My sweet boy." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Best just to leave it, Mina," when he took her a step forwards. "You don't want to arrive too late." If the words were meant to soothe, they hadn't been successful. Miss Korecki, startled as if shocked, galvanized into action. Mr. Korecki, all but forgotten by the crowd, wept into his apron. She lifted the axe again, brandishing the weapon with skill. "I'll go alone if I have to. I swear I'll bring him back no matter what." Another round of glances between the women, another opportunity to weigh up chances, to sniff out potential routes for social advancement. No one wanted to condone the boy's behaviour, to sympathise with the Careckies, especially if it turned out that Martin had brought this on himself. But if no one helped her now, she might claim cowardice, and use it to challenge the authority of some of the higher-ranked women later. Cowardice was an unbearable vice, Mother often said. No one had fought to the death over accusations in decades, not since Mother had taken over from the previous leader, but there was always the possibility that the practice would be resurrected.